All right, listeners, ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling the fire signs. Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, but going way past the basic horoscope stuff. We want to know what really makes these signs tick.
And we've got a source, Zodiac Fusion, that does exactly that. Like, it even calls out how we use those basic metaphors like the fiery ram for Aries.
Yeah, those are kind of fun. But we're not here for just surface level. What makes this source different? How do they go deeper into the essence of a fire sign?
So take Aries. It's not just acting without thinking. It's more like they have this deep need to be the pioneer, to forge a new path, shake things up. It's almost like this inner calling they can't ignore.
See, now that makes sense.
Yeah.
My best friend's in Aries, and he's always the first to volunteer for any new project at work, even if it seems a little scary. That drive to be first, to take on the challenge, that's so Aries.
Right. And it's similar with Leo, but instead of always being the first, it's more about, well, that ruling sun symbolism. It's like about ego, more about this magnetism they have. And generosity, really, that draws people to them.
So not just a drama queen, more like they can't help but shine, and that warmth extends outward.
Exactly. Think of it like a Leo might organize a huge charity event. And yeah, they like the attention, but it's more because they genuinely want to make a difference, bring people together.
That's a great example. Okay, now Sagittarius. How does this source go beyond they just love to travel?
It's about connecting that archer aiming for the stars to a deeper desire. Not just seeing new places, but understanding them, constantly seeking new perspectives. Like, it's a quest for knowledge, almost more than just fun.
So it's less about that spontaneous trip to a new country and more about wanting to learn to actually experience a different culture and broaden their understanding of the world.
Totally. It's like this drive for meaning and truth that's always pushing them further, aiming higher.
This is already making me rethink how I see these signs.
Yeah.
It's like there's this hidden depth, but the source also talks about the struggles that come with all that, right?
Yeah.
They even call it like navigating life's inferno, which, okay, a little dramatic.
Haha. Yeah, a touch. But it's true, understanding what makes a fire sign tick, you got to look at both sides, the good and the challenging parts of that fiery nature.
So it's not all sunshine and roses. What kind of struggles are we talking about here?
One of the big ones they highlight is impulsivity. Remember how we were talking about Aries charging headfirst into things? Well, that same energy can lead to some rash decisions, overcommitting to plans, speaking without thinking, that kind of thing.
So while that impulsiveness can be a strength, it can also backfire pretty spectacularly if they're not careful.
Exactly. And it applies to all the fire signs in different ways. Like a Leo might jump into a project with that same enthusiasm, but then their need to be the center of attention. It can overshadow everyone else.
And for a Sagittarius, would that impulsivity look like, I don't know, booking that trip without thinking of the logistics? Or any downsides?
Exactly. It's the excitement of the unknown. But sometimes that means they miss the details.
Sounds like a bit of a double-edged sword then, this whole impulsivity thing.
Totally. But the source is careful to say it's not about suppressing that fire. It's more about learning to, manage it. Use it constructively.
Okay, so how do they do that? Are fire signs just doomed to repeat the same mistakes over and over because of this impulsivity?
Not necessarily. Actually, the source uses a really interesting comparison here. They compare fire signs to the phoenix.
Okay, now that's an image. Tell me more about this phoenix comparison.
Well, the phoenix is known for rising from the ashes, right? So the source uses this as a metaphor for how resilient fire signs can be. They might mess up, might even burn some bridges along the way, but they have this ability to learn and come back even stronger.
So even though their impulsivity might get them into trouble, it's that same fire that fuels their determination to learn and adapt, to rise above those challenges, so to speak.
Exactly. It's like they have this inner flame that can never truly be extinguished no matter what obstacles life throws their way. And it's part of what makes them so captivating.
This is fascinating. We're really starting to see the complexities here, their strengths, their struggles, and that resilience that really shines through. Now, I know we have to take a quick break, but when we come back, I thought I'd dive into how this fiery energy plays out in their creative expression, their relationships. So don't go anywhere, listeners. We'll be right back. And we're back, listeners, diving headfirst back into the world of fire signs. Before the break, we were talking about their resilience, that whole phoenix rising from the ashes thing.
And it's that resilience, that drive that really fuels their creativity too. The source, Zodiac Fusion, talks about that a lot.
So we're moving past just saying fire signs are creative. What makes their approach different? More specific, you know.
Well, the source connects it back to that spontaneity we talked about, that constant need for new experiences. For an Aries, that might look like a million new projects always popping up, always jumping in headfirst, no hesitation.
So less about like dabbling in different art forms, more about the chase for a new creative challenge, pushing boundaries, taking risks, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Now, with a Leo, it's interesting. Their creativity, it's almost like it takes center stage. They've got that natural flair for the dramatic,
Yeah.
a need to express themselves in big, bold ways. That could
Wow.
be why so many Leos end up in performance, design, anywhere they can really shine, captivate an audience.
Like they've got this inner spotlight and it has to be shared with the world, and their creativity is how they do it.
Yeah, exactly. Then you've got Sagittarius, always off on some quest for knowledge, right? Exploring new places, new ideas. Their creativity, it often comes from that, from connecting things that other people might not, taking those diverse experiences and making something new.
So not necessarily tied to like painting or music,
Mm.
but maybe storytelling, teaching, even entrepreneurship, right? It's about bringing all those different things together.
Absolutely. They're like sponges, constantly soaking up new info, and it all gets mixed together into their creative process.
That's so cool. Each fire sign with its own way of channeling that spark, all driven by what makes them tick as individuals.
Yeah.
But the source also says that even with all that, even with this natural creativity, fire signs still struggle, right?
Right. They make it clear that creative blocks, self-doubt, that's universal, even for fire signs.
So even with all that passion and energy, there are times when the well runs dry.
Oh, for sure. For an Aries, that probably feels like slamming into a brick wall. They're all about action, so just sitting with that, not being able to do anything,
Okay.
that's got to be tough.
And for a Leo, would it be more of a hit to the ego? Like, wait, my usual brilliance isn't working.
Exactly. They start questioning everything. Have I lost it? Am I not good enough anymore? And that can spiral pretty quickly.
What about a Sagittarius? How would they experience a block?
For them, it might be this feeling of being lost, adrift. They're so used to always having something new on the horizon, so when that inspiration dries up, that can be really unsettling.
Like their well of ideas has just
Yeah.
vanished, and they don't know where to turn next.
Right. But that's where that resilience comes in again. The source is sure to point out that even then, even when faced with those challenges, fire signs have this inner strength to eventually get back on track.
So it's not about never hitting those roadblocks. It's about being aware enough to recognize them and being able to pull yourself out.
Yeah. And that kind of leads us to another big thing the source digs into about fire signs: relationships. How all that fiery energy plays out with the people around them.
Oh, yes. Relationships. Things are about to get interesting. I can feel it.
What they basically say that fire signs, they bring this undeniable intensity to all their relationships. Friends, family, romantic partners. It doesn't matter. That fire is there.
Tracks with everything else we've talked about so far.
Yeah.
So how does that intensity show itself in relationships specifically? Give me the details.
Well, for one, they're incredibly passionate partners, super devoted, they don't hold back, which can be amazing if you can handle it. But it's definitely not for everyone.
That's what I'm picturing. Exhilarating, but maybe a little terrifying too.
Exactly. That's the thing about fire signs in relationships. You got to be ready for that heat.
So it's not about taming the fire. It's about finding someone who can appreciate it, who can stay warm without getting burned. Right?
Perfectly put. And that's where understanding the nuances of each fire sign becomes really important, because they're not all the same, obviously.
Okay, so break it down for us. How does this relationship intensity show up differently for, say, an Aries versus a Leo versus a Sagittarius?
Well, with an Aries, think of it like a passionate pursuit. Always. They want excitement, spontaneity, they crave adventure, and their relationships reflect that.
So like grand romantic gestures, whirlwind romances, maybe a few dramatic arguments thrown in there for good measure.
Yep, that sounds about right. They live life on their own terms, and their relationships are no exception.
Definitely sounds like a wild ride.
Yeah.
Okay, what about Leo? How does their fire influence their love life?
Leos, they need admiration, appreciation, and they're big on showing their love in big, extravagant ways.
So it's like love is a stage, and they're the star. Always wanting that validation from their partner.
In a way, yeah. But it's not just ego. They genuinely want their partner to feel special, loved. They just express it in a very Leo way.
Like they want the relationship to be a celebration, this constant affirmation of their connection.
Exactly. Now, Sagittarius, always searching for adventure, right? Expanding their horizons. For them, a good relationship is one that can keep up, that can grow and evolve alongside them.
So less about stability and routine, more about a partner who's down to pack a bag and go, travel the world, try new things, never stop exploring.
You got it. Someone who's both a lover and a co-pilot on their journey through life.
This is so interesting. They might share that core intensity, but it plays out so differently for each sign. But before we get too lost in love and relationships, I think we need to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at how fire signs can harness that fire for personal growth. Don't go anywhere, listeners. And we're back, listeners, diving right back into the heart of the fire signs. We've covered how that fiery energy plays out in their creativity, their relationships. But what about using it for personal growth? That's where things get really interesting.
Right, because it's not enough to just know you're a fire sign, Zodiac Fusion, this source we're looking at, they really emphasize that. It's like, okay, now what? How do you actually use that knowledge to grow?
Yeah, like having a superpower is cool and all, but you need the instruction manual to really make it work for you. So what's the instruction manual for fire sign growth look like, according to this source?
Self-awareness is huge, like huge EE. Knowing your strengths, obviously, that passion, that drive, but also those shadow sides, the not so great parts of those same traits.
So recognizing that the same fire that fuels their passions can also lead to some, let's say, not so great decisions if they aren't careful.
Exactly. And that's where self-reflection comes in, which for an Aries can be tough. They like to move, So taking a step back, analyzing their motives, that takes practice. But it's about recognizing those impulses before they act on them.
So instead of just going with their gut all the time, which we know fire signs love to do, it's more about pausing, even just for a second, and thinking, okay, what's the real reason I'm doing this?
Totally. And that's something a Leo might struggle with too, but in a different way. That desire to be adored, to be in the spotlight, that's part of their charm, right? But for real growth, they've got to look at that and ask, is this coming from a healthy place?
So less about dimming their shine, more about making sure it's fueled by self-love, not just a need for external validation.
Exactly. And for a Sagittarius, that self-awareness might look like questioning their constant need for newness. Like, it's one thing to be adventurous, but are they running towards something or away from something else?
That's such a good point. It's making sure that adventurous spirit is driven by genuine curiosity and not like a fear of missing out or a fear just sitting with themselves for a minute.
Right. And that kind of leads to another big thing the source talks about with fire sign growth, embracing change.
Which kind of ironic, right? Aren't fire signs already all about change and trying new things?
True, but this is about changing how they view change,
Yeah.
Instead of seeing setbacks as failures, it's about reframing them. Like, okay, this is an opportunity to learn, to grow, like an alchemist turning, I don't know, lead into gold.
Instead of getting discouraged, it's about tapping into that phoenix energy again.
Yeah.
Using what happened to become even stronger, wiser.
Yes. And for an Aries, that might look like, instead of comparing themselves to others, they channel that competitive energy inward.
And for a Leo, maybe it's about accepting that they're not going to get a standing ovation every time. And that's okay.
Right. And for Sagittarius, embracing change could be about, like, finding the beauty and stillness in the present moment instead of constantly chasing the next big thing.
It's finding that balance between their natural need for movement with, like, the understanding that growth happens in the quiet moments too.
Exactly.
This has been so insightful. It's like, yeah, fire signs are confident, but there's so much more to them when you really dig into personal growth.
For sure. And Zodiac Fusion really stresses that this is a journey, not a destination. It's something you're always working on. And for fire signs, that's a good thing. They thrive when they can approach it with that same passion they bring to everything else.
It's like their whole life is an adventure, and this is just another exciting part of it. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of fire signs, listeners.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and those spirits bright.
And remember, you might be a fire sign, but you don't have to literally set the world on fire to make a difference. But hey, a little spark never hurt anyone, right? Until next time, keep exploring.